I see a lot of leaders who I think are very lazy and kind of myopic, and they hide behind this doctrine of fairness or the facade of fairness. I'll treat everyone the same, kind of as one style fits all. That's a big mistake, because the reality is you as a leader have to adapt to each follower to get the most out of them. So I have to understand Jeanie. I have to understand what makes you tick, what motivates you. I have to kind of see you as a whole person. I actually have to engage with you and talk to you. Novel idea, right? Talk to our followers. And so we have to just keep remembering, this is such a fundamental point. It's about them. It's not about us as leaders. And that to me has always been critical.
Welcome to the Warriors at Work show. This is Jeanie Coomber, your guide and host. This is a show for men and women in the workplace who want to move from the predictable to the potent. This is your weekly dose of inspiration with an edge. I talk with CEOs and shamans, sports marketing executives and therapists. All of us are like-minded thinkers and doers who tell stories, share wisdom, and challenge each other to have the best life possible inside and outside the office. Welcome to your Warrior Conversation. Welcome to Warriors at Work. This is Jeanie Coomber, your guide and host. I'm continuing to have a series of conversations with executive leaders and offering their perspective on the idea of followership, which, as we know, is a key component to the leadership discussion, how we're showing up as leaders, how we're creating organizations and cultures that embrace the idea of followership. Today, I had a conversation with Dr. Richard Dool. He is a very, very interesting guy. Not only is he a former executive leader of various organizations like AT&T and General Electric, he also served as CEO of both public and private companies. He shifted gears. He's very immersed in the world of academia at Rutgers University. He's also an author of multiple books on leadership. And he has a management consulting company. And in this conversation, we break down a lot of his personal experiences running global organizations. How did followership show up? How did he encourage it? What did he do when he didn't have followership? We also talk about followership through the lens of his experience in the classroom, working with graduate students, how he was leveraging real-time business and leadership scenarios over the last year and a half to really embrace a more robust perspective on leadership. I hope this conversation really helps to support all of my leaders out there that are extraordinary at creating an environment of followership. And maybe you learn a couple of things that you didn't know, ideas, perspectives, strategies. Enjoy this conversation. Welcome to the Warriors at Work show. This is Jeanie Coomber, your guide and host. And I'm continuing my month-long focus on the concept of followership. And I get to talk to various executive leaders about this concept through the lens of their own leadership journey. And I'm thrilled to have with me here Dr. Rick Dool. So Rick, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Good morning, Jeanie. It's my pleasure.
So where I thought we could start is, obviously, you're a global executive leader who shifted into academia, and you're in the center of leadership conversations every single day. But what I'd love for you to do first is let's step back and let's think about Rick, the global executive leader. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what your strongest attributes were from a leadership perspective and how you knew.
Okay. Actually, I was thinking about that a lot when I was thinking about your question there. So I got my first leadership assignment at 25, back in New York telephone days, long, long time ago. And I realized pretty quickly how woefully unprepared I was to lead. And so I learned pretty early that, I was never afraid to say, I don't know, what do you think? And to ask and seek help. So I think my first attribute is that's lasted me for 30 plus years now. I'm never afraid to be a little bit humble and be a constant learner. I never got too full of myself as a leader. I've always been very employee, and now I'm very student centric. So I've always been very employee centric. So I was doing servant leadership before I even knew what it was. Because I distinctly realize I'm only as good as they are, so I got to do this through them. A basic fundamental, right? Which we always forget. I don't think I've ever been the smartest or the savviest or even the most glib in some of the leadership roles, but I learned early on I could outwork most people. So I've had a pretty high level of commitment and a pretty good work ethic. The last thing I'd say is, and again, I have a mentor I've actually had for 35 years, and he taught me this lesson: just do what you say you're going to do. And how fundamental is that as a leader, right? So I learned early on from this guy, that I'm going to do it. I'm going to commit to something. I'm going to do it. So I think that kind of stands out for me.
What's so interesting about that is when you think about business in particular, a lot of times politicking will shift that commitment. So we don't always follow through and do what we say we're going to do. We let the conditions adjust us, which is very tied to this concept of followership.
Sure.
And I would love for you to tell us what you think followership really means.
Sure. Very few of us are instant leaders, right? Except for founders. We all start as followers. Sometimes I think leaders forget that, and they get a little too full of themselves, and it kind of goes to their head. We have to remember that at one point, we were followers. And I, go back to my point about lifelong learning. I've always been an observer of leaders and watchers of leaders and learning from them. And as a follower, I constantly looked at what other people doing. What makes that person unique? What makes him or her different? So I did that a lot. And we have to earn the respect and trust of our followers. We got to create an environment that gets them to be their leverage whatever their uniqueness is. Here's the problem I also see. I see a lot. I'm pretty harsh on this. I see a lot of leaders who I think are very lazy and kind of myopic, and they hide behind this doctrine of fairness or the facade of fairness. I'll treat everyone the same, kind of as one style fits all. That's a big mistake, because the reality is you as a leader have to adapt each follower to get the most out of them. So I have to understand Jeanie. I have to understand what makes you tick, what motivates you. I have to kind of see you as a whole person. I actually have to engage with you and talk to you. A novel idea, right? Talk to our followers. And so we have to just keep remembering, this is such a fundamental point. It's about them. It's not about us as leaders. And that to me has always been critical.
So when you think about the concept of followership, so, again, you're immersed in this leadership conversation with your students at Rutgers. How do you talk about this concept of followership with them?
So I try and make sure they understand that it's something you have to experience. I can talk all I want, and I can use all the proper theory and even some of the practical things and best practices, but you have to experience it. You have to, unfortunately, you have to go through the outstanding leader, the average leader, and the toxic leader. You got to kind of experience those. Good news for me in my career, I've worked for very few toxic leaders. I've worked for some outstanding leaders, but most of the leaders I work for are average. They're good. I mean, they're okay. They're not great. You got to learn from them too. So the first thing I tell the students all the time is be constantly observing. Learn what goes well and doesn't go. I probably learn more from the poor leaders I work for than the good ones. Obviously what not to do, right?
Right.
So, and it's one of those things that there is some innate skills in people. We've been studying this for 100 plus years. The leader versus born argument, right? Obviously, the consensus is it's mostly learned, but there's something unique about some people, right? There's something innate in some of them. Some of them have presence. Some have something we just can't attach ourselves to. In my case, I think it's my work ethic. I think is probably innate. The servant orientation is probably innate, but I've enhanced it through experience. So the other point I tell students is, any chance you get to experience it, you got to jump in. Don't be afraid. If that door opens, run through it. And try and get that experience.
So when you talk about some of these attributes being innate, before we did the recording, you were telling me a lot of your inclination for leadership came from how you were raised.
Yes.
I'd love for you to just give a little context there.
Well, I'm a son of a lifelong career Marine, and I moved 23 times in my life. Not only when my father was in the Marines, I was in the Marines myself, but I moved 6 times when I worked for AT&T and for GE. So change to me is normal. It's natural. So I'm not afraid of change. In fact, the other extreme, I embrace change. I like change. I don't like inertia. I don't like complacency. Plus, I'm a little unusual. At this age, I've worked for 9 different companies. Now, 6 of those I was the CEO of a venture capital firm, so I ran those companies. But, I'm not like the Gen Zs today. They're going to work for 89 companies in a career. Me as a 60-something-year-old working for 9 is a little different. So I embraced all those experiences. I worked for big companies, AT&T and GE, and I worked for 12 years for small companies where I worried about making payroll. So I think all those experiences really helped me.
So did your father and your upbringing, did the concept of followership come up?
Well, in the military, obviously the chain of command. So if you're a lower rank, you're definitely looking up to the upper rank, right?
Right.
And so it's not quite that stringent, anymore. They're more open to it, especially they can't recruit Gen Zs anymore if they're going to have that kind of environment. But just respecting your leaders and respecting what they do, and respecting the rank is something he taught me. But also, learning from them. And they would say, look, I don't want to say there was great officers in the Marines all the time either. There were some bad ones too.
Sure. Just
like there aren't any leadership organization. You have to learn from them too.
So I'm curious, when you think about followership and leadership, what do you see as that relationship when you think about like attributes, characteristics? How do you see them going together?
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about that when you were getting prepared for this. Thinking about the attributes of a follower, right? What are the three things that I always wanted in a follower? What I tried to do myself as a follower, and then I always look for a follower. And then as a leader, how can I enhance those? The one is I always wanted my followers, my subordinates, to tell me what I needed to hear versus wanted to hear. And I would go out of my way. So you tell me that's the dumbest thing you ever heard. You can tell me I'm making a mistake. It's okay. I'd pray for someone to do that in public forum, like in a meeting, and then I'd praise them for doing it. I'd really make people comfortable. The one rule I had, though, is if you see me making a mistake and you don't tell me, then we're going to have a problem. So I try to create that foster environment where they tell me what I need to hear. The other thing I used to do, and again, I had a boss teach me this. He used to call it the +1 move. Do what you're supposed to do, Rick, and then do one thing more if you can. Try and find a way to enhance that one thing a little bit more. I like that. Tell me what I need to hear, the +1. And the last one I always look for is really, think on their own and kind of anticipate, what the boss might want, what the leader might want. So that's what I tried to do as a follower. And that served me well because I got promoted pretty quickly. So I was also known as a pretty straight shooter as a follower. I'd tell my boss straight and tell him directly. I wouldn't spin it. I wouldn't try and hide it. Even bad news, I tell them, objectively. So I kind of looked at that myself and developed those skills. Now I look for those things as a leader. I look for those same things in followers. I try to nurture those things and help them, because they're going to stand out if they do that.
So when you think about, let's just zoom out, look at the business landscape, because I know you had shared with me that this was a vivid leadership lab right now in the business community, just leading in difficult times with all sorts of circumstances. I would love for you to add your point of view on where you're seeing followership show up. Like what are some of the conditions, the cultures, the environments that you're seeing?
So the first thing is we've seen outstanding leaders being really communicative and creating a safe environment for people to use their voice and to share what their thinking is. And then we see the other extreme where you have leaders that kind of hoard information and shut down communication. The kind of information is power. The better ones are creating an environment where people can talk, they can share, and also express, concern and have a kind of release valve, a stress release valve, if you will. So they're more communicative, they're more open, they create more personal engagement opportunities. I'll tell you, even at Rutgers, I had my same job I had before, but my days are going 8 to 8 these days. And my responsibilities haven't changed. What's happened is I have to do more outreach. I have to do more. The student conversations I have are longer. I try to do more live conversations than I do through email because I'm finding email is just too flat in this environment. Yeah. So I think the big thing is creating an environment where voices can be heard. I think that's the number one thing. And we've seen extremes on that. Some great and some really poor.
So when you think about the concept of followership, do you think there's generational differences? I mean, obviously you're talking to a lot of Gen Z. Mm-hmm. You're also in the consulting space, so you're speaking to all different leaders all day long. So what's your take on the generational differences, if any? When it comes to
boy, I wish there were none. There are tons, unfortunately. For the first time in our history, I don't think people realize this. We have five active generations that work at the same time. That's never happened before. You could even argue maybe 6 if you're going to count some 70s. People aren't retiring, right? And there are dramatic differences in the generations between things like their views on power, their views on authority, their views on teaming, how they communicate. We look at the Gen Zs. That's obviously a group that I pay a lot of attention. In fact, I wrote a book on them, and I have a colleague at Rutgers who wrote 3 books on them. So we study Gen Z a lot. They're not going to come to work, for money. They're coming for a higher purpose. They want to do something good. They also don't want to work a traditional 9 to 5 Monday to Friday office job. And the big thing for them is they want their voice heard. They want to have some way, some voice to shape their job and what they do. Well, we're not used to that, especially as baby boomers, even somewhat millennials. We're kind of told that the boss tells us what to do, not Gen Zs. They're coming in expecting to have a voice. So that's going to be a big adaptation for leaders. Simple things like how do they handle conflict? How do they handle debate? What do they consider the work-life balance? There's a lot of things to try, to navigate here. You could be a 30-year-old supervisor today, have 3 people younger than you and 4 people older than you. You got to figure out how to do all of it. It goes back to the point we said earlier. You have to engage the individuals as whole people and see them as themselves and engage with each one of them individually. Because if you do a one-style-fits-all, you're going to fail, particularly across generations.
I think about that through the lens of the work that I do as an executive coach. I have to meet people where they are to raise the bar. It's not like I show up cookie cutter to say, okay, this is what we're going to be doing from a leadership perspective. So I love that concept. The other thing I'm curious about is when you think back on being a global executive leader, I'd love for you to share a story or an insight when you didn't have followership and you recognized it and you had to create some change. So any stories or thoughts come to mind when you just had to step in and pivot?
Oh gosh, there's a few of those. I think the one that's the one that was most challenging for me. Think about this concept. So we have teams at work, right? About 70% of Americans report that they work in teams in some form or another at work these days. So teams are coming on dramatically. And even at GE, we use the matrix organizational style, which is kind of awkward anyway. But the most challenging environment, think about this, is a multicultural, multi-time zone virtual team. That, from a leadership standpoint, biggest challenge there is. And I struggle with that. I had a team at one point at GE. I had people in China, in Sao Paulo, in Brazil, in the US, in England, and in Europe. Trying to get them to work as a team, trying to navigate across cultures and do that virtually, very challenging. And so to your point about creating followership, it's such a distinct environment, and it's very difficult. It took a long time. And what I had to do is travel. I had to go see people face to face. And even though we end up doing a lot of work virtually, you had to establish those connections. The point you said earlier, kind of see them where they are. I had to go to them, to do that. And the good news for me is I had a prior experience where I ran a company that we had no physical offices. Our office was our intranet site. And I had staff in the US and Israel and France and England. And so when we did have an office, when we did meet, we went to rental space, like a hotel space, and met. So I learned from that experience that you have to go meet people. You have to see them. You can't lose the face-to-face element. In this crazy environment, we've learned to work remotely, and that's great. But if we lose the face-to-face part, it's going to be really challenging. So I think that's the hardest one for me.
That brings up a follow-up question when you think about creating followerships and driving culture and, trying to create environments of innovation and reimagination. What are some ideas that you have on how to create that type of relationship in the absence of travel, in the absence of face-to-face?
Well, the one thing is you have to have that, what I would call that overarching frame. Some people call it the vision statement. Some people call it mission. I would call it purpose. Why are we here? What are we doing? You have to create that. So leaders got a tough job. They got to create this compelling purpose or vision statement, right? They got to communicate in such a way that people buy into it. They got to do it broadly and deeply, so across the organization down. Then they have to lead its execution. And then on top of all that, they got to live it. They got to be the exemplar. They got to be the consistent champion. That's a lot to expect of a leader. Unfortunately, those are the rules. Those are terms of engagement. You got to do all that. Boy, and we've seen leaders step up in this past year, and we've seen others fail miserably at that. But to your direct question, it's an overarching purpose, that frame. If you get that right, and people can understand it and they can see it and feel connected to it, it works. The other thing that I think a lot of leaders fail to do there is they just assume that Jeanie understands her position and how she fits that purpose. They assume that's the case. Well, that's not always the case. And they miss opportunities to translate. So, Jeanie, when you did that, let me tell you how that fit the culture or how that fits our purpose. Let me tell you why it matters, what you just did. They fail to see those translation opportunities, as I call them.
I love that. Translation opportunities. tying it directly back on how it affects the bottom line or what they've just done to advance something or give some meaning to something. I love that.
Goes back to our conversation about the Gen Zs. They need to feel connected to that purpose, the greater good we're here for.
Wow, that is so good. I'm also curious when I think about leadership for a second, and I think about the work that I'm doing and coming into organizations. I would love to hear your point of view on why do companies struggle to take someone out of a leadership role that isn't successful, that isn't creating followership, even though they may have it as a competency or a value of the company, but they're also not spending the time in many cases to do that skill building, because I find a lot of people get into leadership roles that have never had any exposure to it. So I'm just curious, what's your take on all of that?
Well, that's a deep rabbit hole. All those things. Let's start with the first point: is how do we create leaders in this country? Well, there's not one great universal place we go, right? There's not one way to do that. How do we get most leaders? They take the best practitioner. Poof, you're a leader. The age old example is take your best salesperson, make him or her the sales manager.
Yes.
Right? Big mistake. As we all know, your attributes as a practitioner, individual contributor, are not the same as a manager. And yet, in America, you get ahead by moving up, right? So higher titles, more turf, more budget, et cetera. So it's really kind of a challenging, construct when you think about it. So that's the first problem. Again, no universal way to develop leaders. How do we do it? We throw them in. You learn on the job. So you get through immersion experience, and that does work, but it's very costly. It takes a long time. And to your point, let's say you find someone, we inappropriately put them in the position, or inadvertently, or premature, or they are just not leaders. They just don't have the skill set, and yet we persist. And there's a few reasons that happens. One is, if I made that person a leader, I don't want to admit my failure, so I'll be the one to save them. I'll be it's like this hero concept. I'll be the one to turn them around, or we'll transfer the problem around. Another famous thing happens in American culture, American companies, right? I'll make it someone else's problem. I'll tell you, GE is pretty strong about it. I mean, it's a meritocracy writ large. You have an opportunity to be a leader. You get a second one, you don't get a third one. And what they'll do is either you're gone, I mean, literally you're out of the job, or they'll put you on the periphery. They'll find one of those, they call them special assignment jobs, right? And they put you on the periphery and get you out of the line. And I'm fine with that. I mean, you have to deliver at some point. We can talk about servant leaders all we want and good followership management, but in the end, you got to deliver. Yeah. So no, but I also don't agree with the concept, one chance and you're out. I mean, you have kind of a moral, even a practical, financial obligation to help people succeed and try and figure out a way to make them succeed. So find the best place for them, but you're not going to get multiple chances as a leader.
Oh, if I had like one of those applause emojis right now, I would hit the applause button. So let's talk about your experiences in the classroom, and because you had some really good examples of businesses that you think are really getting this right. They're establishing the culture. They're really being very people centric. They're doing lots of things to get into discussion. So love to hear your perspective on that and what some of those discussions have been in the classroom.
It's really interesting because I'm teaching mostly graduate students right now, and 60% of my students are working full time. So they're coming to our program primarily for a professional pivot of some sort. They want a promotion, they want a bigger job, they want to shift industries, something like that. They're not really here for research intention. They're here more for professional intention. So what they expect of us, kind of learn it tonight, apply it tomorrow. So a lot of my faculty, including me, people like myself, we're former practitioners, and I bring that experience to the classroom. And they thirst for that. These students just want that. Tell me the best practice. What I do in a lot of my class, I do a lot of vignettes or scenarios. What would you do if, student? And it's amazing to me how naive some of these students are when you think about it. They give you the idealistic answer. Even a 28-year-old graduates don't give you the idealistic answer. It's okay, but have you thought about that? So I gave them an example. In fact, this just happened this week, actually. At one point, I ran a company in India, and I had a Hindu and I had a Muslim couple, a man and a woman, who wanted to get married. Well, that's a real challenge. Now, I'm an American. What the hell do I know about all this stuff, right? And so I'm trying to figure this out. I had the parents of these employees come to me as the CEO of the company and talk. I want to negotiate this marriage. What am I doing here? It's kind of a strange environment, right? And so I'm trying to share with the students, you can't, how are you going to deal with that? That's something that comes out of the blue. All right, you're going to hire a programmer, and he's a devout Muslim. He's got to pray 5 times a day. 2 of those times are at work. Now what do you do? So I try and hit them with situations like that, so that these are real-time practical solutions, but in the cross-cultural world, in the world we're living in now, you're going to face them. What would you do? And so we do a lot of that kind of work in the classroom to try and get them to understand and think it through. And sometimes we offer some best practices from experiences as well.
Are there any businesses that are coming up in your conversations that you're like, yeah, they're really getting this one right? They're doing a great job.
I will tell you, in fact, the book, I just finished a book in these conditions, which is really, the one thing about the pandemic, I did have time to do a little research and writing. And I wrote a book called Leading in Difficult Times and Challenging Circumstances. J&J, for example, has stood up to me. Johnson & Johnson, that company, they have increased their corporate social responsibility activity out there. They face some challenges. They've had some challenges to get some pushback on the vaccine. They've had some pushback on some other challenges, but they own up to it. You might probably remember the history, and then back to the Tylenol murders back 30 years ago. They stuck to that credo, and so even in difficult times, they stick to it. And so they don't have a pristine record, of course, huge, but I like the way they're consistent on that. I look at Microsoft, and then the new CEO Nadella, he's all about purpose and people keep connected and trying to see the world beyond the pandemic and what are we going to learn from these lessons. And we think of Microsoft, we think of Gates and Steve Ballmer, right? We think traditional leaders. Well, they've completely changed. I mean, they've gotten more humble as a company, which I really I'm impressed with. I've also looked at a few political leaders. Like the one I'm most impressed with is the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Her name is just I think I always pronounce it wrong, Jacinda Ardern. And she, to me, was the epitome of leading through the pandemic, leading through the crisis. She came out early. She was decisive, but she was empathetic. She was communicative. So I see her on the political side, similar like I see J&J and Microsoft. They're adapting to the environment and doing some really good things.
The adapting to the environment, I think, is a really crucial piece here. And just from what I'm seeing, companies that are struggling are making determinations and then following that determination rather than saying, okay, does this work? Does this line up with what people are really looking for? And what we're learning more than anything is it's this just in time, very moment to moment type of decision making and leadership, which makes the whole concept of followership that much harder.
Sure.
Because people are watching and really following you. What you're saying, how you're showing up, how you're making decisions. The other thing that we didn't hit on that I'm curious, and being that you've had CEO roles, you've been in C-suite roles many, many times. How does followership play a part from a peer perspective? Because I'm sure your peers were very influential in your ascension from a career perspective. So let's talk about followership through the peer lens.
Well, I'm going to give you two different perspectives. I'll give you the kind of the core perspective. I'm also going to give you the classroom perspective on that. Let me start with the classroom just to make that because it's easier. I use what's called a dialogue intensive model in my classes. So it's very, dialogue and very discussion intensive. I mean, I could have 10 students, we could have 200 postings in a week. It's very engaging. And the whole concept of that is peer-to-peer learning. It's not just me as a professor teaching a student and student talking to me. It's them talking to each other. And I had to tell you, from my standpoint, I learn all the time. Because if I have 22 people in this, 22 students in this class, and they're all kind of crazily sharing with each other and sharing anecdotes, experiences, sources, what a rich experience it is.
Yeah.
And so that's the foundation of my class, the way I teach my classes. I also think about that at work. How do we get everyone talking to each other? I'm sure you've probably seen this. Google did an interesting study on teams, and they said the best teams are ones that everyone talks to each other a lot. And everyone's voice is equal weighted, and you see the scatter charts. They're talking to everybody. It's like ammunition all over the place. And so that peer-to-peer learning and that peer-to-peer support's critical. We forget sometimes that most of our social inactivity, our social interaction happens at work. We think about family and friends, but that's really small of the hours each week. It's mostly at work. Even in the remote environment, it still happens at work. So that peer respect, that peer cohesion is critical. At GE, we did a lot of the 360 kind of performance appraisals. So your peer feedback mattered. And I've learned, like everything, you have some peers that are competitive and you have others that are just completely collaborative. You learn from all of them, right? But the best environments are the leaders that create kind of this collaborative, open, transparent, everyone can talk to everybody environment, and peers talk to each other and they support each other. And it doesn't get too competitive. It's competitive, but it's controlled to the point for the greater good. So that's two different perspectives on it, but I'm a big believer in peer-to-peer interaction.
Did your peers play a crucial role in your ascension to get into the executive ranks?
Oh, yes. I mean, not only watching them, observing them, and learning from them, but also, in moments of doubt, right? When you ask, can I do this? And they'll support you, right? Or they'll give you an idea. And there's nothing more thrilling when you can make a difference in someone and they just appreciate it just because of the fact you helped them. You didn't have to have a motivation. You didn't have to have some kind of, quid pro quo here. I just wanted to help you. And so when people did that to me, that not only did it help me, but I also kind of lasting lesson, give back. Don't always look for something in return. Just offer to help. I never was one to hesitate. I would always share. I never got into that culture of hoarding and try and, keep it to myself. I mean, we've all worked with people like that, and they're disappointing, of course. But the best ones, they openly share. I have to say that, GE can be a pretty intimidating environment at times because there's a lot of type A players there. And so you learn from your peers. Hey, boy, if he or she can do that, maybe I can, So sometimes it's intimidating, sometimes it's exhilarating. It depends on the circumstance.
So I'm curious, who are you following?
So I have a lot, unfortunately, because I'm studying constantly.
All right, so top three. How about top three?
I talked to you about the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Ardeen, right? I also really like Mary Barra, the CEO of General Motors. I watch her a lot. I read a lot about her stuff because, she, not only being the first woman leading that organization, but they had some tough times. If you may recall, they had some serious crisis challenges when she first came on. From a crisis manager standpoint, she's fabulous. I mean, she owned up the problems. She was right out front about it. She didn't hide it. And she set pretty high expectations for the organization to meet that. So she stands out to me. Also, the CEO of Accenture, Julie Sweet, stands out. To the point you were making earlier, we have to change, we have to adapt. She is like the voice of adaptation. And she teaches at Accenture, that's what they do. They consult with companies to do that. And she's constantly talking about we have to adapt, we have to adapt, we have to learn, we have to move forward. It's okay to make a mistake, figure it out, right? And then I mentioned about Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. There's another guy which you may not have heard of, a guy named Mick Ebeling. He's a founder of something called the Not Impossible Labs. That's the name, Not Impossible Labs.
I love that.
Yeah, they take these really knotty, thorny problems and figure out is there a way to create a solution for it. So I like watching them just because I like watching the way they approach problems, and nothing's too intimidating to them. And what's really interesting is they do a lot of crowdsourcing, and they do a lot of the learnings out there in the crowd. Let's get them all involved. And they're great at breaking down problems into little pieces and then attacking the pieces. So that's kind of an array of people I'm following, just give you some ideas.
So here's my last question for you, Rick. When you think about all the people listening, watching, whether they're business owners or they're executive leaders, what are a couple of things that you want people to sit with or think about as it relates to the whole followership discussion?
The first thing is that this is the foundation of everything. You've got to create an environment, and I hate to use these cliche words, but open, transparent, active communication. I mean, you got to be more communicative than ever. That to me is everything, because if you don't create that environment where people are talking and sharing, all the rest is kind of moot because you're not going to get everyone fully engaged. That's the first thing. Secondly, a former CEO of GE, Jeff Immelt, you remember GE at that point was 350,000 employees, 150 billion rev, so a huge company, right? But he always talked about being fully in the moment. So when you engage with an employee, even if it's just 3 minutes, even if it's in the hallway, be fully in that moment. Give that person your undivided attention. That's a mindset for a leader. Don't be distracted. Don't be the next thing. When I'm talking to Jeanie, this is the most important moment right now. And seeing you as kind of the whole person, I think leaders forget that, and they kind of run through life quickly. They run through their leadership lives, and they have these fleeting little moments of interaction. You got to make them matter. And of course, you can't make every moment matter, but think about intentionally making every moment matter. So being really communicative and opening up the voice so everyone can be heard, making sure people are seen and heard in those little bit of moments. I think those two things matter the most. Kind of everything else kind of follows if you think about it, because if that's the frame, good things usually happen.
Yes. Well, Rick, what a fantastic conversation. I so appreciate all that you're doing in the world, not just as a leader, a consultant, but also as an author. So thank you again for being here.
My pleasure. I enjoyed it. I love the concept of warriors at work. I love the way you're doing this. So great job.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Warriors at Work show. If you are interested in learning more about what we do at the Warriors at Work show and platform, be sure to go over to my website, Jeanie Coomber, and subscribe to my monthly Warrior Playbook newsletter. I share everything that I'm up to month by month, as well as some lessons and insights that I've learned. I'm also interested in hearing any feedback you have about this conversation or future topics. So reach out to me directly on jc@jeanniecoomber.com or on LinkedIn. Be sure to tell your friends and your colleagues about this Warriors at Work conversation. Subscribe, review, and rate us. It's the best way to get this message out into the world. Be well.